The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today, which is titled Gamification Drives Results and Will Prove It. My name's Georgie Cook. I'm Head of Learning Design at Learning Pool, and I'm really excited to be here chatting with you today. We're going to be having a look at gamification, not from a theoretical standpoint, but instead focusing in on the practicalities. What are some of the design secrets behind great gamified courses, and how do they drive results and really create impact in business environments? Let's get started. So before we dive into the detail, some people listening to the webinar today might be surprised to see Learning Pool's name associated with gamification. You might be more used to hearing us talk about the great responsive learning tool Adapt and the Adapt Builder that lets you create scalable, maintainable, responsive courses yourself. Or you might have our name down with Totra LMS or great off-the-shelf content. But for those of you who don't know, about 5 months ago, Learning Pool teamed up with MindClick. So MindClick is now a Learning Pool company, as you can see here. That acquisition was an easy choice to make, given that the two companies have lots in common, including 400 joint clients. But we also have some different specialisms. Gamification is one specialism of MindClick's. MindClick's done lots and lots of gamified courses in the past and has had some great success with those. So now, as a Learning Pool company, we're able to bring MindClick's expertise in. So that's why we're here talking to you today about gamification as Learning Pool. My background, I'm an instructional designer through and through, so I wouldn't be being true to myself if I didn't include some interaction for you guys listening today. So a few points throughout the webinar today, I'm going to be asking some questions for you to all have a think about. So questions just for you to think about, for yourself. What do you think about gamification, things like that. So it'd be great if you can be thinking about those questions in relation to yourself, and I'll be showing some stats we've gathered from when we've asked these questions before. So let's kick off with the first one, which is, how do you feel about gamification? So maybe you feel really positive about gamification. Maybe you've seen some great examples of it before, and you believe in its potential for, really effective. It's a really effective method of training. Or perhaps you're unsure about it and you think it's more of a buzzword than something that can really be applied practically. So just take a moment to think about where you sit on that spectrum. Let's have a look at the results we got last time I asked this question in a presentation. So when I've asked it before, we end up with roughly a 2/3 to a 1/3 split. So here we've got 67% of people placing themselves in the positive camp, and 1/3 of people placing themselves in the camp of being unsure. I think that is probably because gamification has been a buzzword around in the industry so far, for a long time, and I think we've probably all seen some examples of where it hasn't been executed brilliantly, where it's sort of a standard click next e-learning course with a leaderboard at the end, perhaps. So really those game mechanics haven't been thought through brilliantly. I think that can lead to a lot of people being a bit unsure about the execution of gamification. But we do also have lots of people who feel positive about it, people perhaps who are really looking for opportunities to stretch what they're doing with their learning design, to make things more interesting, and to create a fun learning culture in organisations. So now we've had a think about how you personally feel. My next question is, how do you think your stakeholders feel about gamification? So stakeholders can obviously be different for everybody. Maybe it's somebody else within your organisation who would have to sign off on the concept of a gamified course. Maybe it's an SME that you'd need to win over in order to, to get their input into how the course comes about. Perhaps it's some people in your audience. So I think with those people in mind, how do you think they feel about gamification, and does that differ from how you feel about it personally? Let's take a look at what previous people have said. So what tends to happen when I ask this second question is that the 2/3 split goes the other way around. So we end up with about 1/3 of people saying they think their stakeholders are really receptive to the idea of gamification and are keen to try it out. but we have more like 2/3 of people saying their stakeholders are unsure and would need some pretty serious convincing to get on board. I think this can cause a bit of a dilemma when you've got some people who are really keen to give something a try, but the real stakeholders are the ones that are perhaps not quite so sure. And I think it's important for us to ask ourselves why that is. What is it about gamification that makes some stakeholders feel unsure? And some of these things I think are what people can really worry about with gamification. I've had a lot of people say to me before, is gamification adult enough? Perhaps they can see how it works with a young audience, perhaps for millennials or people who are in temporary jobs and need just something exciting. But is it appropriate and adult enough, for people who take their jobs very seriously and are perhaps, in more regulated sectors? Some people might also say, question whether playing is really the same as learning, saying, can we be sure that if people have gone through a game rather than read and interacted with a series of pieces of text, have they really learned the same way? And another query is often, aren't some subjects too serious for games? I think all of these are really great questions we should be asking ourselves. I think nobody should jump into gamification without considering their particular audience and subject area and whether it is the right, how far to take gamification, basically. I think nobody would claim that, full-on games are perfect for every learning solution. But I think, for me, when we break down what gamification is and really applying some game mechanics to learning, there are very few places where I think some form of gamification isn't relevant and isn't a great way of bringing learning to life. But it's also important not to forget some of the practical concerns stakeholders can have as well. Things like, isn't gamification a really expensive option? Doesn't it take ages to build? And again, these are things worth considering. Gamification certainly can be expensive and time-consuming, but it definitely doesn't always have to be. And the example that I'll show you later can go to prove that. But what I think a lot of these stakeholders' concerns really boil down to is, does gamification get results? Is it going to be worth it? Is it worth us taking a risk on something new, on something fun? Is it really going to have the impact in the business that we want it to? And this is a really valid question and what I'm going to be really addressing over the rest of the webinar. I wanted to say really that for me personally, the flip side to all of these questions is another one that I ask myself a lot. And it's what I want to ask you now as well. So that's, do you ever worry about how much knowledge your audience actually retains after they've completed e-learning? So maybe you do actually worry about this sometimes. You think perhaps people might zone out while they're doing some e-learning. Perhaps you don't kind of have their attention all the way through and therefore they're not taking in everything that you hope they will. And as a result, maybe they don't remember everything a couple of weeks after doing the training. Or you might be really confident in the e-learning that you produce and you feel like people are engaged all the way through, they're taking in the information and you've seen that they do actually retain everything and they put the learning into practice at work exactly as you hope them to. So again, have a think about where you sit in that. Is this something that ever worries you? The stats I've got up here really, I think, can be a little bit scary. Often we do have the vast majority of people who get asked that question saying they do worry about how much knowledge their audience retain after e-learning. And surprisingly few people saying they're really confident. I think for those people who do feel like they worry about this, you're really not being paranoid. When I started doing some research into knowledge retention, I pulled some figures together from a few sources that show that if a learner goes through a very passive e-learning experience, so a kind of, a click and read type experience that doesn't have any follow-up or, checkpoints further down the process, that we can really see a steep decline in how much knowledge is being retained. Often after only a couple of hours, 25% of knowledge that's just been absorbed in this, this passive way will be lost. And after 48 hours, 50% has been lost, so only 50% has been retained. And by the time we get to about a week after the learning, most learners will only have retained about 25% of what they've learned, and that kind of continues to tail off over a period of a couple of weeks. So personally for me, this is what really worries me rather than the risk we might take on gamification. And I certainly see gamification as a way that can help us tackle this problem. Gamification is the opposite of a passive sort of click-to-read learning experience. Instead, it's really active all the way through. We're not asking learners to take in information through reading. We're instead treating them as players, and we're getting them to learn through doing things, through competing with each other, through competing with themselves, through passing and failing, through setting them fun and tangible goals to try and reach. And I think from this, when gamification is done right, it can really grab learners' attention, not just at the start of the game, but actually all the way through. It can really increase the engagement between the learner and the subject matter, and also between their peers if you're going for multiplayer games. And I think because of both of those things, a workforce that's much more engaged with the learning is much more likely to apply the outcomes in their day-to-day work, and that's what really drives results in businesses. So what about some examples of this? What I'm going to take you through now is an example of a bespoke gamified project that we created with Boots. Later on, I'm going to have a look at how we can apply gamification into Adapt in the Builder. But for now, to kind of prove the point about driving results, I'm going to use this case study that we've done with Boots. So what did Boots want? What was their challenge? So every year, Boots does a refresher piece of product knowledge training basically for all of their retail staff that's all about their Christmas products, services and special offers. As you can imagine, these change year on year, and Christmas is a very busy time, so it's crucial that staff are really up to speed with what that Christmas product line is every year. So it's an annual training requirement that Boots have in this area. Let's have a look at what their Retail Learning Academy manager, Stephen Evans, had to say about the challenge. So as you can see here, the staff up to speed, with what that Christmas product line is every year. So training requirement that Retail Learning Academy challenge. As he says here, every year Boots traditionally relied on a 20-minute page-turner piece of e-learning. They felt like their staff were starting to lose engagement with that, and they really wanted to do something completely different that would differentiate this year's product training from the others and try and turn around that learning culture. So in his words, we set MindClick quite a difficult challenge to do something wildly different to what we've done historically. I think the team at MindClick would agree with that statement. So we started off doing some analysis of Boots' needs and also of their audience. And after that process, we decided to look to gamification as a solution. As you can see here, this is a very, very Christmassy game board that we designed for them to reflect the fact that we're looking at a Christmas product line. I'm just glad that I'm doing this webinar in December, so the Christmas trees aren't too offensive to everybody. So I'm going to show you, just jump out of this now and show you what the game looks like. So you should be able to see on my screen here. Now the game actually starts with a festive animation to really set the scene. I've skipped that today so we can focus on the game mechanics themselves, but if you imagine there's been an animation before here, and now I land on this fun interactive character selector screen. So I can choose any of these Christmas characters and then enter my name. So the course is starting with some personalisation right at the start. When I click continue, I then personalise it further by selecting the part of the UK I work in. And then the avatar that I've selected has been pulled through onto a fun tactile game board. We can now see some instructions on the screen that are going to walk us through how to play the game, which I'll explain to you as I go through it. So as you can see here, the aim of the game is to move around the board, completing the challenges that you'll encounter on your way and to earn as many gems as you can. So this bit here is what's called setting the epic meaning at the start of a game. You need to set that clear goal so people understand what they're doing and what the purpose of that is. So here to earn as many gems as we can. There are 10 challenges on the board, You can see with these stars, so as we roll our dice and move around, we'll be unlocking 10 challenges. We can do the challenges in any order, but we must do the first 6 to complete the game. And the more we do, the more chances we have to earn gems. This is where we're going to be able to choose our challenges from later. Each time we have a chance of winning 200 gems. And we can also earn extra gems by risking some that we've earned at the start of a challenge. So if I already have a stash of 200, I might be able to bet that many in the hope of getting 2 times my stake back again. So now the instructions are over, it's time to get started with the game. So here I roll the dice. This is truly random dice, so typical. I get 1 on my first move. As I keep rolling, eventually I pass this star and I get to choose a challenge to take. So these are the 6 mandatory ones, which is why they're available first, but once I've completed all of those, these other 4 stars will come up as well. So I'm going to choose to jump into this mini game about the boots advantage. So I get a little bit of content given to me up front, which will help me do well in the game. Once I've gone through those just a couple of short, snappy paragraphs, I then get to some instructions on how to play the game. Now, each of the 10 activities is different, so it's crucial that these instructions are here to help people understand what they're doing each time. And now I've seen the instructions, this is where I get to judge my confidence. So I know that this is all going to be about the boots advantage, what sets them apart from others. So I can now say to myself, well, how confident am I with this knowledge? Do I want to just go ahead without betting anything? Then the maximum I'll be able to win is the 200 gems available. Or do I want to increase my stake, perhaps with an extra 50 gems at stake, meaning I'd get an extra 100 back if I passed, or maybe with 100? So I'm going to choose 50 and go forwards to start the game. So to start the game, I can choose one of these sections on the Christmas tree, the Boots Advantage card. So now I'm choosing, do I think that the Boots Advantage card is an example of something Boots does to give great value, great range, or to make the process easier and more rewarding for their staff? I'm going to choose great value. You can see as I go through this, I'm slowly dressing the Christmas tree. Just whiz through this quickly so that you can see what happens at the end. Okay, so now I've finished, I can get my results. How did I do? Okay, so I did pretty well. I've got some good comprehensive feedback here, so it's showing me not only which ones I got right and wrong, but what the correct answers were as well. And as I move forward, I now find out if I've passed or failed. So great, I passed the game. So that means I got my 200 points for passing the game, and my 50 gem stake doubled to 100 gems. So the total number of gems I've earned in this game is 300. Not a bad start. So now if I go back to the board, I can see that's been reflected in the number of gems I've got. I've collected a star for doing that, so I've collected 1 out of 10, and now I can continue to roll the dice to move around the board. So I won't go through all 10 activities now, but hopefully that's given you an idea of just how immersive and fun and a true game this was that we created for Boots. So let's break that down now. You've kind of seen how the game worked in practice, but let's have a look at how those game features helped us to grab attention, increase engagement, and drive results. So firstly, how were we grabbing attention? What were our design secrets? There are 3 main design secrets I would say here. The first one is to really prioritize the impact that you're trying to make. When you're trying to grab someone's attention at the start of the course, the last thing you want to do is to have the first thing they see be a set of instructions or a really dense paragraph of text. So with the Boots game, we started with a fun animation that was really in theme, in the Christmassy theme, and then followed that up with a character selection. So it means that when learners, launch this from the LMS, they might be expecting a standard e-learning course, and what they get is something totally different, which makes a big impact on them. I'm not saying at all that we don't need the instructions. As you could see, they followed afterwards, but they were in context once I was already excited that I was going to be getting to play a game. So I think that's the way you can really grab learners' attention at the start of a course. And then the next challenge really is, how do you maintain that? So how do you keep that attention once you've got it and stop people zoning out as they go through? There are two things I'd say here. One is to be unpredictable. So as you saw, we had 10 mini games available on the board. We could have had each of those games being the same as each other, but we realised that if we'd done that, although people might have, they would have understood the game and not had to learn other ones, it also would have become dull for them. They'd be predicting, the interactions they had. It's not fun anymore. There's nothing keeping them on the edge of their seat, and we might lose some of that attention. So instead, we were unpredictable with different types of challenges every time they went into a game, which meant they really had to, engage their brains and pay attention. Secondly, we had to really make those games challenging. Answers that are too easy really just aren't going to cut it here. They were not delivering much content. So firstly, to make sure that people are learning properly, we want to be confident that the games were challenging enough. But also, that's really what's keeping people on the edge of their seat. If it's too easy and they can just kind of click through, or it's really obvious what the right answers are, again, they're not really truly engaging with it. It's not going to keep their attention. So if you can really prioritise impact over instruction, you can be unpredictable throughout a game, and you can make sure it's challenging, that's a great way of grabbing and holding your learners' attention throughout the experience. Next, how do you increase the level of engagement they have with the content? 3 key tips here. First one is to really give your learners as much choice as possible. I think one of the quickest ways you can disengage someone is to force them through a very restrictive linear path that removes their ownership from their learning experience. Instead, where you can, let them make choices. So in the Boots game, you saw how they got to choose which games they completed in which order. If they fail one, they can decide whether to retry it straight away or later. They get to decide how many gems they want to bet on particular games. They get a say. Obviously, you can put some parameters around this, so we don't want to give people so much choice that they choose not to do anything, for example. You can still see in the Boots game we said you do have to complete these first 6, but your choice is in which order you do that in. So again, just try and strike that balance so that learners still have an element of choice as they go through the game. The second secret is to try and add an element of risk. There's a great balancing act with games where you want people to feel safe enough to get stuck in and play properly, without worrying too much about getting things wrong or taking ages to revise information beforehand. But you also want them to be on the edge of their seat enough to be truly engaged. So the tactic we used here was allowing players to, decide for themselves how many gems they wanted to bet on the specific games. And this allowed individuals to play with the amount of risk that was right for them. So someone who is really risk averse could choose to actually not bet any extra gems on there, but they wouldn't get the reward of their stake doubling. And people who are really really enjoy a bit of risk and are really up for taking chances, they get to play to the level of risk that's right for them as well. So everybody can get that balance right for themselves. The third design secret to engagement, I think, with games is to try and encourage some healthy competition. So with Boots, for example, we learned early on that there was already a bit of good-natured competition between different stores in terms of sales figures and things like that. So we capitalised on that feeling and helped Boots out with a competitive leaderboard that was between stores rather than between individuals. So although the game itself was single player, the number of gems everyone had at the end of the game contributed towards their store's cumulative total, and those stores were pitched against each other on a leaderboard. So little, competitive incentives and things like that can really be, that extra push people need to pay attention to try and do as well as they can in order to help their store rise to the top. So finally, how did that attention and engagement help us drive results with Boots? We knew that we had, people engaged, but how do we make sure they were still actually learning everything they needed to as well? And what I'd say here really is the core thing is to just, don't forget the adult learning principles that you would normally apply when you're creating a piece of e-learning. Games are different. They are more fun. They do have some extra mechanics and functionality that take more prominence than in a normal e-learning experience. But it's definitely important not to accidentally sort of throw away your adult learning principles as you're bringing these new elements in. So as you're designing games, make sure everything you're doing is really relevant to the learning objectives. So, if what you really want people to learn is customer service skills, then make sure, the game challenges involve dealing with customers. Keep it really relevant. So there's still an element of play, there are still all these game mechanics in there, but it still feels actually relevant and they can still see how they can apply what they're doing in the game to the real life. Secondly, try and embrace failure and repetition. So we all know as people in the learning industry that failure and repetition is a great way to help people learn. The more they practice, the more they have to do things in order to get it right, the less likely they are to forget it. Feedback that's given after failure is often learned much more than feedback that's given after success. So we know that failure and repetition works. And happily, it's also a great feature of gameplay. Anyone who plays PS or Xbox games obviously will know that every time you die or lose a life, you get sent back to a certain point in the game and have to do it again. So it's an example of a mechanic that comes together perfectly for both learning and gameplay. And I say it's something not to be scared of with a gamified course. So, for example, if someone fails one of the Boots games, they do have to go through and do it again. And that could happen 2, 3, 4 times if they keep getting it wrong. It's unlikely they will because we're giving them great feedback to help them. But if they do, if that's what it takes, to help them make sure that's really embedded, then that isn't a bad thing. So having seen how we try to drive results, you're probably wondering whether it worked. I'm happy to say that it did. We did see some great success with this course. So firstly, our client at Boots was pretty happy. You can see his quote here saying he really felt that it helped change how people felt about training in L&D, and it really created buzz with people talking about it, which is great. And this translated into the good feedback we had from learners themselves. I'll just give you a moment to read these quotes. So you can see here that the Boots staff were really happy to have a chance to get stuck in with something active rather than just reading. They felt like the competitive element worked well, and people were inspired enough to discuss the training with each other, which is excellent. That's really what we need. The more people are actually talking about this, the more they continue to learn from their peers afterwards, rather than just having a discrete learning experience. And this great feedback did translate itself into tangible results. So as we heard from Stephen's quote near the start of this webinar about, feeling like the learning culture people were too used to page turners and therefore weren't engaged enough to complete the training. You can see that with our game, there was a 200% increase in users, which is just huge, the number of people who were coming online to do the game. And then from the people who do start the game, a 50% increase as well in how many people completed it and actually got to the end, which is great. And again, we can see that more people doing the training did have an impact on Boots' actual business drivers. So we can see here that these are the sales figures for the 2015 Christmas period, and we can see that those sales did grow in stores that didn't take the e-learning, but grew significantly more in stores that did. So almost a 16% difference in the figures there, which is excellent. And this data and these results that we achieved were recognised just a few weeks ago at the industry awards. So our collaboration with Boots won us silver for the best learning game at the Learning Technologies Awards this year. So it's, I think we know something's worked when the data's been enough to impress those judges. So that was a bit of great extra validation for us in Boots that this gamification project has really helped them drive business results. So I've now got a final question for you, which is, Having seen this case study and the results we managed to achieve with Boots, how do you feel now about gamification? Perhaps if you were unsure before, this might have given you something else to think about, made you feel a bit more positive, or maybe still feel a bit unsure, in which case it'd be great to chat more about it. So have a think about how you feel, and we can look at some results. So 84%, I'm feeling positive and keen to incorporate gamification in learning, and still 12% still feeling a bit unsure, which is totally fair enough. This is obviously only one case study we've talked through here that does have a specific type of content and audience, so it can't be reflective of all organisations out there. But hopefully some of those design secrets you've seen, you'll see how those can be applied in a variety of ways to different types of content, different audience groups as well. The fun illustrated visual theme, for example, isn't a key part of gamification. It can look much more sophisticated if it needs to be. So whether you're in the positive camp or the unsure camp, we'd love to talk more, get your thoughts on it. So do feel free to get in touch after this webinar. We did have lots of other clients who saw the success we had with Boots and have been sold on the idea of gamification themselves. So since then we've used, we've used the board game concept with a few other clients who all were very different from each other and had very different types of requirements. So we've worked with a high street bank on a game all about data. Also worked with a utilities provider on a fire safety course. And finally with a construction company, and their content was all about customer service. So as you can imagine, we've had different, very different audience groups, very different content, and what we've done is really play around with those game mechanics in all of those instances, play around with the visuals, as you can see here, to create unique learning experiences for each of those audiences based on what they need, but still they all have some of those core game mechanics going on, like elements of risk, like personalization, like epic meanings and goals you have to try and achieve. So there's some examples there really of how those game mechanics can be applied in different ways for different people. So all of those examples were bespoke projects that we've done that have incorporated gamification. And I'm sure there are some people on the webinar today who are wondering about how this fits in with Learning Pool's Adapt and Adapt Builder. So if you're not in the market for a bespoke project, what else can we do? So we're currently working on an internal project basically to evolve Adapt along these lines. The joining of MindClick and Learning Pool has really meant we've now got the expertise to do this. So we're going to be adding a lot of gamification features to our Adapt roadmap in the aim of working towards having a scalable and maintainable gamified solution rather than these bespoke ones, in addition to these bespoke ones that we're creating. So watch this space in 2017 for more features being added to Adapt. We'll obviously be able to use them to help create gamified courses in Adapt, and they will, as being part of the builder, they'll also be available for customers to edit themselves or use themselves in your own courses that you're building. In the meantime, while you're waiting for those to appear, or if something has sparked your attention today, we've got some great resources online that you can have a look at. So we've got a white paper that we created with Barclays that's all about strategic gamification. Some great content in there about how gamification can be applied to a whole organisation-wide and to really transform a whole learning culture rather than just a particular project need. We've also got our ultimate guide to gamification, so there are some great hints and tips in there if you're starting to think about gamification, possibly wanting to work with somebody on one or looking for some hints and tips for what you can start doing yourself. So both of those courses, both those resources are available on the Learning Pool and MindClick website, so jump on there and you can download those for free if you're interested. And that brings us to the end of our presentation today. So thank you so much for joining us. It's been really great to chat with everybody today, and I hope there's been, hope we've sparked sparked some thoughts, some inspiration for you. We'd love to hear from you if you want to get in touch, so always open to hearing any of your questions and continuing the discussion. Thank you very much for your time today. Bye everyone.